for all of you here. So Kyle, Allison, Laura, Noah, Brian, myself, Ryan, we're going to drop off. We're going to hand this over to Eric. Eric, the show is yours. If you want to share your slides, and we'll drop off video here.
Sure. All right. Well, thank you. And I have a couple of slides. I don't have too many, mainly because I like to have conversations. And I know this will be through Discord, but that's fine. And so everybody is here. What is credential compartmentalization? I'm going to admit it's a re-term, right? We like to do this in security because maybe the old term isn't useful or people don't understand what's going on or whatever it might be. But one example, there's this whole idea of Azure dangling DNS is out there right now. You know, we need to have a new term because just saying it's a subdomain takeover isn't the same thing. The whole idea of credential compartmentalization is basically falling back to the idea of how many IDs do people have in Active Directory when you are running and making, you're doing changes in a Windows environment. Active Directory is everywhere. With almost every Windows network out there, you have Active Directory. And for the longest time, there's been this idea of we can have two IDs, and that's enough. You have your normal ID, and then maybe you have an admin ID, just two. It used to be, heck, you just had one ID, right? I do everything I want with this one ID. And then Microsoft in 1999 said, that's really not a good idea. You should have more. I think actually they said it even before that. You need to have more than one ID. And some people listened. And so you had two IDs out there. Once again, your normal ID and your administrative ID. Maybe you get your record here, right? That I have my little slide just to show, right? And then you had your second ID to do privileged access, right? We're going to do things like we're going to go out there. We're going to use this one ID to make changes on workstations. We're going to have this one ID to go out there and do changes on servers. We're going to have this ID that is a domain admin because, hey, domain admins can log on to every device in the environment. Why do I want to have a separate ID? It's really great for the people who are trying to do administrative work on devices. It's also really great for attackers. The whole idea of stopping an attacker is really about putting roadblocks up, right? We have this constant never-ending battle of who's winning the weapons race between attackers and defenders. Right now, endpoint protection is doing pretty good. Pretty soon, attackers are going to start beating out and being able to bypass it easier. And you have this never-ending battle. You want to have as many roadblocks as you possibly can. One of the big roadblocks out there has always been network segmentation, right? Let us have multiple networks out there. Let's not have it be wide open. Lots of organizations have tried. Lots of people have had issues. In many cases, this requires you buying extra hardware, extra firewalls, making changes to your network, doing all sorts of behind the scenes work so that an attacker sitting in Office A can't get to all of the potential other workstations in your network in different buildings, or get direct access to your servers. Or if they somehow manage to get access to a web server, can't get access to the backend servers and working through your network. Network segmentation is absolutely wonderful, a great control to have out there, very difficult to implement in cases. This high idea of having multiple accounts doesn't cost you anything. We need to start doing this. We need to have this idea. Microsoft has a concept of device tiering, and credential compartmentalization is around the same idea. It's, well, we have different levels of IDs. We need to use them in different places. Let's try and figure out what that is, right? You don't want to have one or two IDs out there that can do everything. You want to have multiple IDs that can be used in different types of devices. You don't want to have one set or two. I really think more than two is much better, 5, 6. You start having production issues, right? If you're poor infrastructure people and all of your support people need to have multiple IDs, but once again, it starts adding layers. In a Windows environment, moving from one device to another whether that is laterally or privilege escalation, getting access to another device with more privileges is remarkably easy, especially when you start muddying the waters of where people are logging in to do different activities with different types of credentials. So the idea of credential compartmentalization, or just a different term for account tiering, which is going back to device tiering, is you understand what your environment looks like. You have servers, you have workstations, you have people who have the ability to make changes in Active Directory. You have people who can log into some devices, but not all. And you give them different IDs, different sets of credentials to do that. And the idea is you don't have mixing. If someone has an ID that is used for doing server administration, it's only used on servers. If you have an ID that's meant to be used on workstations, use it on workstations. If you're not using LAPS or some other privileged identity management system to gain, to grant privileged access, you start spreading this out. You start making different layers, more of I like to think of it kind of like a target in archery. But you have multiple types of accounts. You have them layered, and you never used a more permissioned account on a less secure device. And then, of course, I don't know if I have to say it, but we're going to say it anyways. Your account should have different passwords, right? Like anything, you don't want to be using the same passwords between multiple systems. I have run into some people. I've been talking about the idea of credential compartmentalization for over 6 years, trying to come up with a different term to have it be exciting, right? Not just device tiering or account tiering. But I've seen failures, even with clients that I've worked on when I've done tests, when I went in the first time and they had the 2 accounts, and therefore very easy to start moving around and pivoting through their environment. I said, well, why don't you have maybe 3 or 4? And some people said, great, we'll do that. We'll have more than 1 account. And then you somehow manage to get the credentials for their low privileged account. And just for fun, you try it on one of their other accounts with more privileges, and lo and behold, works, right? You need to have different passwords. You don't want to use the same password on different types of accounts. And the whole goal here, once again, is that we start separating these things out. So you have this idea of, I have my normal user account. Then I have one that maybe I do work on workstations. This allows me to do administrative access, right? Do work on workstations, admin, make changes, whatever it might be. Then I have my privileged account for server administration. And then really, hey, maybe I have a different account that I can use to start making changes to objects in Active Directory, change passwords or group management, create new users, create new servers, whatever it might be. And then finally, you have your domain admin accounts that are only used on domain controllers or other special devices that will be used for domain admin functions. Believe it or not, domain admin itself, while that is often the goal for many pen testers, right? If I can get domain admin level access, I, at that point, can get anywhere I want, in theory, in your environment. That's why everybody wants to get domain admin. But there are several accounts that are one step below that are almost as good. A member of the Built Administrators group, for example, actually will give you just as many rights. What it doesn't give you the ability to do is to log on to every device by default. That is the big benefit to domain admins. You can log into every device by default, whether that is a workstation or a server or a domain controller, and you have some other benefits as well. But really, they're not that many, unless you're talking about promoting a new domain controller, demoting a domain controller, or other very special activities in Active Directory. So really, you don't need to be handing that out to everybody, and you shouldn't be. You should be having it be lower permission. Once again, we have server administrators. So in your environment, you remove domain admins from your Windows administrators groups, and you add in a new one, so that you start building your web. You make it harder for people to log into different places. When we go through and we talk about this, we need to think about more than just regular users and administrators too. Many groups have many organizations have gone through and started separating things out in this way, where they have multiple IDs for their administrators. Right? Okay, we have a dedicated server administrator team. They have their server admin IDs. We have a dedicated workstation admin team. They have their admin IDs. But then we begin to see failures in other places, like service accounts. I don't know the number of organizations that I've pen tested over the last 6 years, or that I've talked to even beforehand, where you have that one account that is doing, your network access control, right? It's going around, it's going through and periodically checking what devices on the network. And it's a domain admin for some unknown reason. It doesn't need to be, right? Or your account that's out there that is doing vulnerability management scanning on your systems if you don't happen to have a service on your devices that's doing it, right? You do credential-based scans. It is a domain admin because, once again, it can log into every device. Or other things like SQL accounts happen all the time for some unknown reason, right? Service accounts that don't have anything to do with Active Directory are running as incredibly privileged accounts, and they can be used anywhere, and they're very easy to harvest. So service accounts are a big problem. And then the next thing that often gets people into trouble is the separation between dev and production. The two groups that I often target, and I hate to say it this way because it feels like I'm targeting specific people, and in a way I am, but it's because of how often it is set up where your developers in an organization have administrative access to their device, or if they don't have administrative access to their Windows device, they have admin access to dev servers. Very rarely are those dev servers separated very well from production servers. So you find a dev account, he probably, with his regular user account, has high privileges on a server. We've now pivoted to a server. Now from there, most likely, they don't have separate IDs that they're using to connect to backend systems. And once again, those IDs are probably administrators on the backend systems as well, because very few people have gone through to limit service accounts to what Microsoft expects them to be, which is I can log in as a service. I don't have admin rights. So now you pivoted from dev and you pivoted using those IDs running services to a production server. And from there, most likely, you're going to find that server admin who probably is also a domain admin using that one account. And through 3 hops, you've done it. You've gotten domain admin access. If devs are locked down well, the next group that are quite often, unfortunately, not compartmentalized very well are your DBAs. Database administrators, for some reason, tend to have DBO access, database owner access, or that level with their normal user accounts. Very rarely has it been separated out. It is in some places, and if you are, that's great. But quite often, I will see that DBAs do database administration from their workstation to the systems that they are responsible for. And quite often, those DBAs, once again, have administrative access to those servers, not just access to the databases. So you find these groups that quite often, once again, are never considered for compartmentalization. They get to do free work with their normal accounts. And so very easy to pivot. The next thing I quite often hear is, hey, it's okay, I don't log into my workstation with that privileged account. I'm going to do the run as function, or I'm going to do use PowerShell and do credentialed access there. So I'm going to not actually log into my device with my privileged account, but I'm going to somehow put those credentials on the system. While it is better, right, that you have more than one account, you're not just sitting there using your normal user account and reading email and then using the same account to do server administration or Active Directory administration. It is half a step away from being taken over. If, as an attacker, or any attacker, or me as doing a pen test or a red team assessment, can gain admin access to the same device that you have logged into, or you've done a run as, or you have done some sort of credential storing for PowerShell, it is very easy, once again, for me to quickly just steal your identity and become you. I don't even need to get your password. But in some cases, you're actually weakening the security when you do some of these activities, these normal administrative activities. And that's actually what I'm going to show, because many people don't understand that. They think that run as is a very safe method of doing administration, when unfortunately it is not. So here we go. Now we get to see if demos work. It's always a scary thing here because they don't always work. If I can find my screen in the list of all these different things. All right, too many windows open. Here we go. So I'm going to show a couple of different things. First off, this is just a Windows server. It's not actually part of a domain. If you're unfamiliar, once again, most Windows environments have a domain, a centralized method for managing all the identities. This one here, I'm just going to, if it loads, come on. It was standing in the background too long. This box only has local credentials on it. So it's not a member of a domain. I can show in another way too. So he is not part of a domain. He is part of a work group. He is a standalone server. In theory, fairly safe. Believe it or not, in most environments, we can quickly bypass most of your endpoint controls with what I'm about to do here. Everyone has very strong endpoint controls on their workstations. We want to keep them very safe. They are open to all sorts of attacks. There is a setting in Active Directory that allows any user to join a device to your domain. So what I'm very easy here, I'm just going to use the GUI method instead of PowerShell today. So I feel like I want to join this box. I got a normal set of credentials. Let me spell. And perhaps I got this through talking to your help desk and getting them to reset some normal user's password, or maybe I got it through some other method on your network. I got some hashes and I was able to brute force a password through that. Maybe I guessed, right? And I managed to get some regular users' credentials. So you may not believe me right now that user 99 is just a regular user, but I promise you he is. I can show it to you later. And if everything goes well, all right. With a normal user account, I've been able to take this normal Windows server and join it to the domain. What does that mean? You might think it doesn't mean much of anything. However, the way that Active Directory works is that you can push policies down to devices. We can use Active Directory to force configuration changes. But the most lockdown settings are put very close to devices. They're very specific. When you join a computer to the domain, it's placed in such a location that the only thing it's typically going to get is basic auditing and a basic password policy. So what I've been able to do is I've been able to take this system that maybe I own and I brought on my own, right? That has all of my tools on it. It's not one that you control in your environment, but one that I own and I control. And with a normal user account, join it to your environment and make it even more trusted. It doesn't need to be. We can do things offline, but quite often, the closer you can get to a normal device in an environment, the better you are, right? Pen testers, attackers, we use Linux all the time, right? Absolutely. And will work quite often in Windows environments without a problem. But if I can have a Windows box, it's even better. If I can have a Windows box joined to your domain, now it's almost perfect. It's trusted. So I'm just going to finish this up so I can show the other things. Typically, it says, hey, do you want to restart right now? And I don't want to restart at this moment because as an attacker, I want to make sure that only I have access to this box. I mentioned that one of the things domain admins can do is they can log on to every device by default. And that's done when you join the computer to the domain like I did here. Well, I don't want that to happen. I'm going to remove that. Now they don't have any admin access to this box. They would actually have to find some other way to gain access. And the other thing I want to do is, you know what? I'd like to add myself so I don't have to worry about it. Yeah, okay. Thank you. That prompt was basically saying, hey, you're not part, this box isn't part of the domain, so I need you to give me some credentials to search the domain. So I have this box, I've joined it to the domain, it's now considered partially trusted, better than it was before. I make sure that my ID is an administrator and everybody else is not. And now I'll let him reboot. And we'll keep talking here as this, yep, please reboot. We'll come back to him in a minute. So once again, the idea here is we want to have multiple IDs. Number one, a normal user should not be able to join a computer to the domain. That is something that should perhaps be removed. It's a setting in Active Directory. If you've never used Active Directory, this will look a little different, but there's this one setting. Hopefully I'm sharing the right screen. I am. There's this one setting in Active Directory that says, hey, people can add workstations to the domain. It's there by default. This is a default setting. The only way that this was brought up before, now there are more tools and people are running them, auditing tools on their own environment. So maybe this is being picked up more often. But through the years, I've seen it happen quite often where I can just add my own device. This is the one setting. Microsoft used to call this out if you asked them to come review the security of your environment, and they would say you should remove this, but it was considered a medium severity issue, right? The idea that you have some sort of physical access limitations. They can't just come onto your network. But by default, anybody can do this. There's a command if you are on the blue team and you want to make sure that, hey, we want people to add devices to the domain. So for some reason, maybe you have a requirement that you have remote workers who need to be able to do this on their own. You don't want them to send devices back, any perhaps other reasons. There's a way that you can actually go through and you can say, let me change this so that it gets more policies. I did this attack to a very security conscious client at one point. It was actually interesting because they had Microsoft on site doing the review, the Active Directory wrap, they called it at the time. And I did the same thing as right before he brought up that they needed to change the setting. So I joined my computer to the domain and started having some fun. And then we told them about this command. And the next day they said, all right, I want you to try that again and see what happens. They redirected where my computer was joined to. And in that place, they set up a policy that said, as soon as the device comes online, reboot. Not necessarily the best thing for you to do in your environment unless you want to make pen testers' lives uncomfortable. Also, a good reason why you should never join like your own device. You should make sure you're using a VM. The last thing you want to do is join a real box and just have it reboot all the time as soon as it comes online. So I like showing this one just because I see it way too often in environments. It doesn't seem like it's necessarily it doesn't seem as if it is necessarily malicious in intent, or it can be abused, right, in a malicious way, but it can. I now have that trusted device on the network. It's mine. But the real reason I did that is to show you the other things I was talking about, why we need to be sure we don't use run as, or we don't use, I'm signing in and trying to talk at the same time here. Why we want to be sure that we have multiple accounts, because we can't trust run as, we can't trust mapping drives. We cannot, let me sign in, please. All right. And now I have a different problem. That's all right. When demos go wrong, that's right. Now, I'm not showing my whole screen, but it's saying it doesn't want me to log in here. Thank you. All right. So here's my box back again after it finally let me log in. I'm not sure how many of you are red teamers or how many of you are familiar with the utility called Mimikatz. For an Active Directory person or a Windows person, Mimikatz is the boogeyman of utilities. It allows you to interact with the security subsystem of a Windows box. The person who invented it, who came up with it, really did not do it because he felt like he wanted to abuse Windows security. He wanted to understand Windows security, and then it started leading to all of the problems. I have Mimikatz on this box because, once again, I own it. It's my own malicious thing that I've joined to your domain. And to show that it is part of the domain, we can see here, hey, I'm part of the Cleopatra domain. So Mimikatz comes in many flavors and utilities. I'm going to just use the compiled version. By the way, if you are on the blue team or other things and you're relying on endpoint protection to see Mimikatz being run, that is a great thing. You should be. Stop script kiddies, but many of us who do pen testing or other scenarios are developing our own tools that kind of do the same thing. So you need to be looking for behaviors, not specific tools. Quite often, once again, you'll see people who like to look for tools, specific things, and that will quite often not work in every case. So if you've never seen Mimikatz before, it doesn't look like much, but it does a good amount. One of the biggest things that you used to be able to do with it is get passwords in clear text just by logging in, just by running one simple little utility here. So by using this one command, securlsa logon passwords, what it used to do with older Windows systems is it would show you everybody who has logged into this box, not just the session you were in, but anybody who has logged into the box, plus or minus a bit amount of time, because Windows doesn't immediately purge things out of memory. So you could quite often see passwords stored in clear text right here for some amount of time. Starting with 2012 R2, Microsoft made it so you couldn't see passwords in clear text by default, which is why I don't see them here. All right. You still have some other things that you can do with Mimikatz, but in this case, once again, no passwords. But let's say I am an administrator is on this box, and he's done something like, let's map a drive to another server. So I'm just going to add in a name here. The share doesn't make a big difference, but the idea is I want to connect with a different set of credentials. Okay. Let us pick a server administration account. Okay. So I've just mapped a drive, which basically let me connect to a Windows file share with a different set of credentials. If we run the same command, we let it spin through. Now we go up and we could see that a password has been run in clear text. It's now stored. We actually made things worse as far as security, right? We have now, because someone is using this box to do administration and they've mapped a drive, now we have a password in clear text when before we didn't. All right. The same thing happens if you decide you want to do some PowerShell commands. I don't know what to do. We're just going to run. PowerShell, everybody loves PowerShell. It's very verbose, but one thing you can do is store credentials to be used. Let's pick a domain admin this time. I'm just going to ask it to reach out, connect to a domain. Please tab complete. Thank you. And so what this command said is, I just want you to go out, connect to the domain. I want you to connect to this specific domain, Cleopatra, and I want you to use the credentials I typed in before. Now, when we run this command yet again, the same one as before. You know, if we scroll through, we will see the password for the domain admin in clear text. If I can find, here we are. The same general idea. Using mapping drives and storing credentials in PowerShell is weaker than using run as. All right. Run as itself is problematic. Who do we want to run this one as? We'll run this as DA1 again. Maybe we'll run it as DA1 again. We're going to use the classic command that will get you flagged by every EDR out there known to man. Who am I? Because it is a malicious command. Everybody knows that. We'll let it think. Okay. So this window is running as domain admin 1. As proven, if we do some sort of fun stuff with PowerShell, we can see passwords in clear text. I'm going to run another quick command to Mimikatz to shift things a little bit to say I want to actually run as system. What you'll see is if I can find it in this long list that it spit out for us. Here we go. Is just as if I've logged in, because technically I did. My information is here. There is, if we look at Task Manager and we see who's actually logged in, he just shows as me, bummer. We actually did log in. It stored a profile. It created everything just as if you logged in interactively, just you have not. Now, once again, I don't see clear text passwords, but that's okay. Just by the fact that you have logged into this box, there are other attacks that can be used to actually gain the same level of access as this window. And while I opened it in my session, it doesn't make a difference as long as someone is logged onto the box with his credentials. Even if I can't get to your specific box where you've logged in and run Mimikatz on it because you've controlled things, there are ways of having Mimikatz just use memory dumps. Endpoint protection used to not block that. It is getting better and now it does block it. But in some cases, you need to actually tell the endpoint protection, don't let people dump the memory process for the security subsystem, LSAS is what it's called. Sometimes it will just alert you to say, hey, something has happened. Other times it physically blocks you. But once again, depending on what you're using, maybe or maybe not. Maybe it just lets you know. There are other tools that will do even more fun things like let the attacker think they dumped LSAS, but they actually weren't able to. Overall, the whole idea of protecting your environment is setting up those roadblocks, as I said. We want to set up multiple ways. We want to make sure that we don't open pathways. There are tools and utilities out there to make it very easy for attackers to see, I need to find some level of access on this box where this person is logged in with these credentials and they are doing something. And now from there, I can pivot to this box and I can move through the environment. And it's all there because once again, administrators of environments, people who are doing the day-to-day work, who are trying to keep operations running, don't have many different sets of IDs, different sets of credentials. There are open pathways, there are bridges between different sensitivity levels of different devices, workstations to servers, servers to domain controllers, or servers to other servers, whatever it might be. Pathways exist because once again, network segmentation is very difficult at times to do. Zero trust, if you've actually gone through and been able to do that, that's great. If not, you fall back to network segmentation. If you can't do network segmentation, you need to find other ways. Having multiple sets of credentials is one way of doing this. It prevents things from interacting in this way. If there is no pathway from a normal user to a workstation administrator account, you've separated it. That doesn't happen as often. But if you can separate your workstations from your servers, you've made a barrier that can't be jumped across unless there's some other method to do it, right? Bad patches or a bad application or something installed there. You have not made it easy within your own operational methodology. You have not made your user identities the method to have those privilege escalation hops happen. We want to have this idea of different types of devices and different sets of credentials to use on them. It really is the simplest method of protecting an environment, a Windows environment, without a considerable outlay. Why will it not let me stop sharing here? Uh-oh. Can anyone hear me? For me, it looks like Zoom froze. All right, well, you can hear me, but I just can't change anything. So everybody gets to see this screen because I can't change anything else. Yeah, when you tried the OSCP. I was going to show a different screen, but I can't change anything. And if I leave, that will be it. So everybody gets to look at this blue screen and my face for the rest. Yeah, pwned. Really, once again, the whole idea here is we want to just not have those simple pathways. We do not want to have something that can move from a workstation to a server, etc. Uh-oh. Yes, Windows blue screen, always my favorite too. Yeah, I'm hoping I'm not been hacked. It's going to be a good day if it has been. Can anybody see me? Hack the planet. You can hear me. All right, we can see. Perfect. I'm glad you can see me. So I'd like to see, since I'm kind of stuck and I can't exactly switch, I'm now stuck at what I was going to say. So, and smell me. Oh, well, I'm glad I took a shower today. Perfect. It's okay. Yeah. As far as slides, really, once again, we want to be sure that we want to be sure we have multiple IDs. You come up with, you use the Microsoft method of device tiering. We try and separate things out between tier 1, 2, 3, 0, whatever it might be, domain controllers being the most secure. And then I could definitely try turning it off and back on again, but then I'll disappear. But we want to separate our devices into different tiers of sensitivity, have different IDs that do it. The whole idea of credential compartmentalization is not to use the same type of ID on different types of devices. Oh, and now my camera is frozen. So since I'm having technical difficulties, were there any questions or anything before I hopefully don't get dropped? 41 minutes.
There we go. Can you
Perfect.
see me?
I cannot see anything. All I can see Discord, but I cannot. Zoom is completely hung for me.
We're gonna do an audible here because yeah, do you have questions? Absolutely. And we've got a really nice like satellite feed, like it's like you're coming out of Beirut or something.
Oh, nice.
It's just like it's like live from the Beirut office kind of thing. And I would generally for those of you little behind the scenes, whenever we're doing this and I'm typing back to all of you and I say capture for Q&A, I'm sitting at my standing desk. So when you kind of did that audible, I'm like, oh, I can put all my stuff back on. Hold on. So yeah, let's go through the questions because I think that's actually a great way because we've got enough questions that we could probably spend the next 20 minutes talking about it. So Let's go through here. And what I'll do is I'll share my screen and we'll get Discord back on the screen. So, if people want to, respond to your answers or things like that, we can do that. We always have backup plans to backup plans to backup plans. So, let's go back to kind of the beginning here, right? So, Mohammed here. Hi, it seems very easy, but may I ask, do you know of any real use case which has been implemented in a real company which can be shared with us too, a real scenario which has been used before? So again, talking about compartmentalizing these things, are there any public examples of companies that do this right that you can share? That's kind of a hard one, to be honest. Oh, did we finally lose Brian completely? Or not Brian, I'm sorry, Eric. All right.
He said he'd be right back in, but he's not here yet.
Oh, okay. Very good. All right. So folks, hang out for a second while we get this going here. Definitely let's see your best technical issues meme. And I actually have one. I'll tell a little quick story while we're waiting here. I'll do a little song and dance, right? Bronwyn, who many of you know as Corvus, on our newscast and shows up on a lot of webcasts. She uses Starlink where she is in California, which generally is pretty good. It's kind of amazing when you think about it, right? There's these satellites hovering Earth, and now you can get internet. It's not always perfect though, and when it works, it works, and when it doesn't, it really doesn't. And I actually made like a thing that gets shared in group chat a lot, which is a meme of Elon like typing on a password in a Starlink satellite, and it says technical difficulties. Please hold. Elon is going into hardcore mode, which obviously is not, but either way, yeah, we're trying to turn it on. Oh, Eric's in the chat. He's trying. I wonder if he's got the. Ryan did. Well, don't worry about it. I'll ask you later. I was going to ask if we checked to see if he was using the Zoom client. So we're trying to get Eric back. We've got a bunch of your questions. Do keep in mind though that we do have a bunch of stuff coming up here soon. Why? There we go. Yeah, technical difficulties. Please, the old Simpsons one. I like that. We do have other webcasts coming up here on Thursday as well. We've got a webcast coming up from our team here at Black Hills. And then also we've got our Wild West Hackin' Fest coming up, which you definitely want to check out. That's in too few days for all of us actually doing stuff to build it. So hopefully we'll get Ryan back here in a second. I like the gifts though. I like the sweating. I like the very good. Oh, instructor's coming back. I'm on television. Oh. We getting Eric?
Me? Did you say you needed me?
No. I decided not.
You said my name. You
I
said
did,
my
and
name.
then I oh, look at that.
Well,
There-
thank you
oh,
so
he's
much.
back.
I was searching my email for the link with the code direct. I'm like, I can't find the link. I can't find the link. Thank you for sending it to me so much. Oh my goodness.
Oh, that's funny.
Oh man. All right.
How many hackers does it take to run Zoom?
Yeah, way too many.
Minimum complement of hackers to operate Zoom is 3. All right, so as you dropped off, and as I was trying to do as much soft shoe and patter as I possibly could, we got some questions.
Awesome.
Why don't we spend the next kind of 15 minutes kind of doing some questions here? So we got one from Mohammed here, and I'm actually going to summarize this one because I read it. I read the whole thing before, but essentially it's this. Do you have any examples of public companies, or more specifically what I mean is public examples that you can share of people that do it right, that do the compartmentalization right? And I know that's a hard one because maybe you know companies that do because you've worked with them, but you can't talk about them. So,
And unfortunately, that's where I'm at. I can think of 3 or 4 that I have tested that have done it right. But unfortunately, because of where I am, I can't say who they are.
Right.
So it is an unfortunate thing. And even for them, it's a classic problem of maintaining that. It's always easier to set something up at the very beginning, right? And then as time goes on, things begin to shift and staying vigilant. And you start seeing that begin to creep in, where once again, some people have the ability to do some things that they shouldn't be able to. I'm trying to think of one. Is there anybody that I could list?
Well, I would say if while you're thinking, there is no shortage of white papers and whatnot from Google on Beyond Corp, on
Yes.
passwordless technologies, on things like that. And where I would start, if you're saying you're looking, Mohammed, if you're looking for companies to do that, look up the Beyond Trust and Beyond was it Beyond Corp and Beyond. They did another paper recently, and it's all about essentially zero trust, but it goes into a lot of the fundamentals of why you have to separate and compartmentalize these things and how you check them.
Yeah.
So it's academic in that no plan survives first contact with the enemy, but it is a starting point of how to do it right. So
Yeah.
would you agree with that, Eric, or you think of another one?
No, absolutely. And as you said, zero trust, beyond trust, many people have documented, even when you go back, and it's definitely not the first, but I think their recommendation was written 5 years ago and has not shifted as to what you're supposed to be doing, right? So this is not a new thing, and which is why I said, all right, maybe if I give it a new term, instead of calling it account tiering and device tiering, we call it something a little bit snazzier, maybe it'll start taking on. So, yeah, the whole idea, I saw somebody, oh, I'd quit if I had all these accounts. I've worked at several different, before I did security consulting and moved to the red team side, the offensive security side. I worked for some larger institutions. At one of them, even though we may not have had the best credential compartmentalization, I still had a large number of accounts. Distinct separation between dev, UAT, production, and even within production, multiple accounts. It is sometimes difficult, I agree, when you think about having all these different accounts. It seems like it is overwhelming, but it is not necessarily. It is just a slightly different way of working through it. You know what, Bill? I would say that honestly, if you write it down and put it on your keyboard, you're probably better than if you like stored it on a text file on your Windows box, which people still do. I mean, I could think of much less secure methods, believe it or not, than that.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree with that because so no one else is right. Yeah. I've had that conversation with students, where they go, oh, people writing it on the keyboard. And I'm like, who's breaking into your grandma's house to do that?
Exactly.
Like,
Yeah.
like it's all about context, right?
Mhm.
If I can get my grandparents, or I hate to pick on grandparents, but if I can get my grandparents to use a different password and write it down in a password logbook and put it in their nightstand or in their little safe,
Yep.
yeah, please do that all day long.
I use my parents as my go-to. I love my parents,
Right.
absolutely love them. But my mother is not technology savvy. Actually, she has this incredible superpower where if she touches an electronic device, it has the possibility of just falling apart.
Mm,
But when I got them to stop storing credentials, website credentials in the browser to Bitwarden or something else, I had a much better feeling about life.
yeah.
So
Yeah, no, exactly. So, all right, going on to Taylor Schmidt here. How many organizations do you find using, and they put in quote, true managed service accounts or group managed service
ooh,
accounts?
that is a great question. Not
Yeah,
many.
yeah.
This is okay. Microsoft has introduced so many things to shore up some of the weaknesses in Windows environments, but they don't do the best promotion of these controls. And group managed service accounts are one of those things that are great to use. Unfortunately, even internally, they can't get them to work perfectly. The idea of a group managed service account is one where you create an ID in Active Directory and it manages its own password, and it will be incredibly long, complex, and you're never going to crack the thing. The problem is if you actually have to enter that password into anything, it
Mm,
will not work, right? Not you personally, but it needs to do it. Like SQL Management Studio, when you're setting up SQL servers, you had to actually enter the password somewhere. It can't fix that, but it is a great utility. I've run into a handful, and they are also the same people who actually have a very strong concept of privileged management and what service accounts should be doing rather than how they are typically set up. So I've run into a handful, not very many, because once again, while you can set them up to run services, they cannot be used in every app, especially if the app is expecting that service to go out and reach to other systems, and you need to enter that password somewhere.
Yeah, no, I've ran into that problem in enterprises more times than I can count. You go in with all the like Microsoft has this type of account that we can use, and then they
Yep.
go to use it and they're like, doesn't work with the app.
Yep. And
Okay.
it's one of those, it's Microsoft has something, can't work with the app. There, I talk about this in my class, and I'm not trying to promote the class necessarily, but the idea of not everybody understands how these things work to allow them to be used, right? Once again, if Microsoft actually had the way of promoting it in a good way that maybe developers could ingest how to use it, it would help.
Yeah.
So
Moldy Acorn had a couple questions, and I'm going to try and consolidate some of them into one here. So they're a sysadmin talking to a red teamer friend, and they encountered, probably for the first time, highly privileged accounts needing to be checked out or borrowed. And it said, have you heard of this? And there was a lot of chat in Discord that yes,
Yep.
and a lot of people made recommendations about that, but was hoping maybe you could talk about that a little bit.
absolutely. So privileged access management, or PIM, privileged identity management. There are multiple utilities. Probably the most well-known out there is going to be CyberArk, the big bad, big bad of the environment. It can be absolutely great. And that is the idea of, you don't actually, well, there are different ways of implementing it. Either A, you sign into this other app and it knows the password and it will log you into other systems using the app, or you get one temporarily that it resets it. That is a great set of utilities. CyberArk's not the only one who does it. Thycotic has a system. Microsoft has a system if you use Azure. Microsoft has one for on-prem as well, but nobody really understands what PAM and
So
how
let
to
me
set up
stop you
the
there for a
professionals.
second, because that was kind of the next question.
Okay.
So it was around, hey, a lot of this stuff seems to be focused on cloud, right?
Yep.
What are some of the on-prem solutions or differences from what you described that somebody who's still running on-prem AD has got to think about?
So yeah, I've got bad news for you, unfortunately. Microsoft has not made significant changes to how Active Directory works since 2016. 2019, they added some extra enhancements so that it could work better with Azure, right? Getting these types of systems internally without buying another product like CyberArk or something else is going to be very difficult. Microsoft did release this idea of a red forest or a bastion forest. And yet another situation where they said, hey, it's great, it will work for you, but we're only going to tell you about it and you have to figure out yourself and not give you all the tools to actually implement it. Yeah, HashiCorp Vault is another one, can be free depending on your size. There are multiple ones that can do this. Yeah, there are many here. But it's quite often going to have to purchase a third-party product or start integrating more into Azure to leverage it.
Yeah, no, and that's unfortunate. And it's unfortunate because I mean, Microsoft really doesn't have an incentive to go through and do that unless government wants it for on-prem changes, or just move to
Yep.
the cloud, we'll manage it for you. And then they've even taken as far as building Fed Cloud. So hey,
Yep.
just move to the cloud and do this. So yeah, unfortunately,
And that is, it's
stuck
where
with a-
everything is released first and then maybe backporting parts of it back to an on-prem solution, right? So yeah, it is a big push, right? Services instead of products.
Yeah. So anonymous attendee, which I mean, great name, love it. Can you bypass CrowdStrike? Usually CrowdStrike catches this attack method. Now, this is kind of point in time. This was running around 12/19. So I think you were kind of looking at not Mimikatz, but the attack directly before that.
So will CrowdStrike catch you joining a device to the domain? No, I'm going to say no. I'm thinking back about clients that I've tested who had CrowdStrike, and I was able to do this because once again, this is what I did before, where I joined my computer to the domain, if that's what you're talking about. Normal, absolute normal behavior. There is nothing malicious in that activity in any way, shape, or form. It's just like many people do and very successful people do. If I can act like a normal process, I am much better positioned to be successful.
Yeah, no, agreed. And I just had to respond in Discord
Oh
here.
yeah. You want, yeah.
The animal, like I've been there, like why I'm in Zoom, like trying to close somebody else's thing. I'm like, why can't I close it? All right. So I do want to add one other piece in there because it's been a while since I've been inside of CrowdStrike's admin console, but to add in for an anonymous attendee there, whether it's CrowdStrike or Carbon Black or Tanium or I don't know, pick your EDR poison,
Yep.
whatever it may be. Generally, adding a system to the domain is not going to necessarily be a CrowdStrike rule. It's going to be an administrative rule that says I haven't. You would have to have, and I'm trying to remember what is in CrowdStrike, but a listener in the environment that polls 80 and says, wait a minute, you don't have this agent on here. And either your EDR tool has the ability to automatically deploy it if it is a managed asset that just missed it from the gold standard. If it is a rogue asset, it should be alerting to tell you, I have an asset on the network. It does not have CrowdStrike and I cannot install it. And that should be a high level alert.
Thank you for finishing that. That is absolutely correct. Yes, it's whether or not it wouldn't stop the attack no matter what. But then if you have other methods of finding those devices, which hopefully you do, because number one and number two, CIS controls, right? Know what's on your network, know what's on those devices on your network, right? Very important. So hopefully you do have that, whether it's CrowdStrike or some other process that knows what's there. Absolutely.
Yeah. So we are about 2 minutes out. You said you could stick around for a few minutes though, correct?
Absolutely. Yeah, I'll be more than happy to, especially since Zoom decided to die on me here.
Yeah, no, it's okay. Hey, stuff happens, you know. So for those of you who have to drop off in about a minute, thank you for joining. Very much appreciate it.
Absolutely.
We have got more stuff coming on Thursday, tomorrow. We've got another BHIS webcast coming up on, and I was actually pulling up the link right now because I did not have it in front of me, but we've got our team tomorrow talking as well. So please join us then for, oh my gosh, I can't type quick enough. But while I'm doing that as well, if you can't stick around, definitely check out the chatter in Discord later. Also, we do all have this video already up and online for you. The link on YouTube, you can go back and rewatch the live view. So you can see all that stuff right now, share it with friends, check it out, rewatch it. It is all there. And we did that because we got feedback from you. Tomorrow's is log file analysis with Derek and Ethan. So if you are into the forensics and you are into whatever, join us over on the BHS webcast. We'll be over there tomorrow. And 1 o'clock Eastern time. So definitely join us there. And again, thank you for joining us. Thank you for spending time
Thank
with
you.
us. Yeah.
And don't forget the Sasquatch. If you're interested in Antisyphon training and you haven't yet, feel free to send me a message on Discord, shoot us an email, or just put in Sasquatch or your sassiest gif of Sasquatch if you would like me to reach out to you about training.
Yeah. Whether it be Eric's training or any training.
There's so much good training.
Yeah. So yeah, dump Sasquatch in the chat. Oh, we got some Sasquatches there for you. So we'll follow up with you. Look for a DM in Discord if you message us that way. If you message us through the Zoom Q&A, we'll hit you an email. So it is 1 o'clock. For those of you who got to jump off and do meetings, thank you for joining. For those that want to stick around for a little bit of extra innings, we're going to finish up maybe like 10 more questions and then drop off. So all right, let's take a look here. Where were we? Yeah. Anonymous attendee, could be the same one, could be another one, don't know, total mystery. Asking this question just for confirmation that I'm understanding the requirements of the attack correctly. You landed on a workstation and had admin privileges. You had compromised credentials of a regular domain user previously somewhere else. Your admin privileges on the workstation allowed you to add the regular domain user as admin. Is that what they saw you do?
Yes, in a way. So the idea here is I have my own device. And yes, I'm an administrator on it, most likely. If it's my own device, if it's not joined to a domain, most likely you are an administrator on it, just by the sheer fact you could get onto the box. Whether that is a standalone device that is running a web server or one you brought yourself and just plugged into the network. Then you get credentials for any user in the domain, and you leverage those credentials to join it to the domain. So yes, you do need to have administrative access on the box you're joining, But once again, you will most likely have that by the sheer fact you are on it, whether you brought it yourself or it is one that you have compromised that's a standalone box.
Yeah, one of the things we were talking about here over in the chat, it wasn't a question, but it came up and everyone started screaming laps, laps, laps. And I'm like,
Mhm.
yeah, no, for those that don't know, it's was it local admin privilege
Administrative password.
service or something like that? Or
Local
password
administrative
service?
password. Yeah, something. Yes.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah, so it's whenever you image the machine, the domain tracks a unique local admin password. So yeah, you might get the local admin password for that one machine, but not the entire fleet until you compromise all of AD. And it's a speed bump,
you,
but it's a
you
very
say
good.
that.
Well, I guess that's true. If
Unfortunately,
they logged in. Yeah, that's true.
I'm not discouraging Laps. Laps is a great thing that you should use unless you have another utility managing your local administrator passwords, right? There are other utilities that do it, but Laps is a free one for Microsoft. I've run into situations where the Laps password is stored in Active Directory. And if you relax security in Active Directory at all, you have the likelihood of exposing that password inadvertently. The best example I have of this one is a organization was trying out Laps. And so they set it up and they inadvertently granted all domain users, which is anybody in the domain, the ability to see the Laps password for an administrator's workstation.
Ouch. See, that is even where I thought you were going. I thought you were going if a domain admin had logged into that local machine and you
could do
had
that, yes.
domain admin hash on there.
Yep.
Hopefully nobody had done that. But yeah, if you compromise a box that also happens to have a domain admin, it is a domain admin. That hash might still be there.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And yes, password hashes hang around for a long time. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I know you probably have another question, but somebody said I thought Laps was not supported by Microsoft. I believe it is. They ported it over into Intune, actually. So Laps is now, even if you are just a cloud environment, right? You don't even have on-prem AD, you can use Laps and have admin access to boxes.
Yeah, you see, it was that over there, John. You scared me. I'm like, what? Why would they get to? No,
Yeah.
don't do that. Yeah. Good, very good. Yeah, I do remember something about that because I think when it moved into Intune, that was there. Yeah, we are getting a lot of questions about the slides, so let's just address that. Eric, the slides that you did have up, you're going to get those over to put in Discord, or you're going to put them in the slide
Sure.
resource.
I can give that. Yes, I'll be happy
Perfect.
to post those somewhere and get you the link.
Sweet. So Zach's got a question here. Why did you delete the user and add it again? And they also asked for if you could share the PowerShell command that you used to add the user. But yeah, I guess at one point around 1226, you deleted a user and re-added it. Was that for a specific reason?
No. So what I did, I'm scared to share anything. So when you join a device to the domain, what it does is at that moment, it adds a group called domain admins to the administrator group on the box at that moment. So what I did is I removed that group and I added my user in. So I removed what is put there by default and then added my own. So my user account remained as an administrator in the box, but no one else in the domain had admin privileges on the box.
All right.
Now, when I started the let's add a user, it prompted me for credentials again. Yes, because it needed to query information from AD.
Got it. Taking care of that. Excellent. All right. Next question here. What are this is from Andrew Yao. Where was the blue team tool script that Eric had mentioned for scrubbing the default users adding their own devices to the domain?
That I will be happy to post. So yes.
All right. Well, do you know the name of it? Is it the tool you use from GitHub or is it one you wrote?
The one that changes. No, so it's not one that I wrote. It is just changing a policy, a GPO setting, and then running a command that is built into a Windows domain controller to redirect things. So I'll be happy to post that.
Cool. Tom Riley, which tools do you recommend having there? So this was right around 1230. So
on your Windows box?
Yeah, I guess that. So Tom, if you want to in the Discord there, maybe clarify that a little bit. Do you mean the tools that Eric uses to do the attacks or the tools that we should be using to protect? So we'll come back to that if they want to ask a little further. And one of the other anonymous attendees just wanted to know, hey, is the device that you're using, is that in the cloud? The one that you were kind of doing the tests on?
Yes, it is.
Okay, very good. Now I've been meaning to play with that more in the Microsoft desktop type setup. All right, let's take a look here. Does anonymous attendee again, does Credential Guard do anything to prevent Mimikatz or similar tools? I believe there's a bypass for Credential Guard, but it's still important. Is it still important to enable?
Yes, yes, and yes, and yes. So everything that you said,
Yeah.
so it changes what can and can't be done, right? Credential Guard, there's two different protections that Microsoft put in, and forgive me for not remembering the specifics of each one. One of them requires that you have a signed driver that allows you to interact with it, and the other one does it in a slightly different way. But yes, there are bypasses that can work, but once again, it goes back to extra steps that need to be taken before things can occur. And that is what you want, right? You want roadblocks, things that you can detect, things that show a flag that immediately let you know something's going on. The more things I have to do to start using the box how I want, not how you expect it to be used, the better chances are you're going to see that behavior.
All right, very good. A couple more questions, then we'll kind of wrap up here. Let's take a look here. Device and log Credential Guard. Very special agent Anthony Dinozo. I did like the name. Can RDP with a domain cred leave credential artifacts on the target system? And they put, and I'm hoping this makes sense to you. Tim is not here. I'd ask him. Now they also clarified later on either would it leave artifacts on the target system or on the origin system?
Yeah, so there is direct RDP does leave something that Mimikatz can pick up. Yes. So quite often we would suggest things like RDP gateways, right? Other solutions like that. So you aren't necessarily doing direct RDP. But yes, it can happen.
Okay. Very good. Answering a few questions in the chat that are not necessarily ones that we need to bring up here. Okay, great. Anonymous Cindy, what are your thoughts on PowerShell IR tools like Kanza? Does this still present the same credential issues when ran over WinRM/PS remoting?
So I'm not familiar with that tool specifically. So I'm going to make some generic statements and we'll see where it goes. If you have the ability to do WinRM, right, you now have some level of access to that box, right? WinRM, any sort of remote management means that you are either supplying creds that can be taken or you are using your own creds, therefore you have permissions. So I don't know how that tool works itself, whether it is opening a window in a utility that lets you do it. I wish I could give you specifics of how it was working for me to say whether it would be a problem or not. But once again, if you are supplying credentials to be used to pass through, then I would expect it can be taken.
Got it. All right. Brett Dreyer, I believe is how the name is said, so forgive me if I'm saying it wrong there. Is there a best PowerShell practice to purge credential data if it needs to be used in a script? Similarly, is there a PowerShell method to purge potential domain admin credentials on a machine in environments where their hashes may remain currently? I have an answer to the first one. I don't know about the second one. Is that the script that somebody else had asked you about, or do you have other recommendations?
So, excuse me. So you could remove the profile. There's two different parts here when we're talking about it's being stored on the box. There is the in-memory portion that is there for some amount of time after a Windows box, someone logs in, which is what we were stealing with Mimikatz. The second is the profile information that is stored longer. So removing the profiles from the box will remove the potential cache creds, which shouldn't, hopefully you have settings that won't allow that to happen anyways, like protected users group or other things. But otherwise it would be finding those profiles and purging them off of the box. I don't know of a script. I've not written one. I'm sure there is one out there that would let you do that. As far as storing credentials in a PowerShell file, that is always a no-no, right? So storing passwords in clear text in anything is not a good best practice.
Yeah, so for Brett, I would look up tools like HashiCorp and other secret managers, not password managers necessarily, but secret
Secret
managers.
manage-
Yeah, so you can write your scripts and your code that essentially call HashiCorp and say, I need this secret, and then HashiCorp
Yep.
will decide, one, if that script or that system is allowed to do that, and there's a number of ways to configure it. And then second, HashiCorp can consistently update the actual credentials that are used. So every time that script's run, instead of using a static function, essentially what you're doing is you're passing a token saying, hey, I'm allowed to have this. And then HashiCorp will give that password temporarily, like Eric said, run in memory, and then move on with its life. Right. And you can revoke that token. There's a lot of different ways to configure, but you need to look up something called secrets management, and HashiCorp would be a good place to start.
Now, the one thing I want to say there, the important thing to remember when you bring any of these tools in, CyberArk, HashiCorp, Secret Manager, anything like that, we need to get back to the idea of how do you treat that device? How do you compartmentalize who can access that box? Because as soon as you say this HashiCorp or this secret manager or this utility now is responsible for passwords for all these things in AD, you need to be sure you're securing that whatever just as strongly as you are your domain admins or other accounts, right? You can't have it be a less secure or you're going to run into problems. I've run into organizations where we set up CyberArk. Everything is awesome. Unfortunately, I log into CyberArk with user A's normal user account and password. There's no MFA on it, nothing. And now have a nice day, right? We're off to the races. Not just CyberArk, other password managers or secret managers, same idea. That's the whole idea of, hey, we set up some good compartmentalization in the beginning. Now we added a new utility to help us with something to make it more secure, but we inadvertently made it less secure because we aren't treating that system as properly as we should.
Yeah, that is always the downside. It's when you put enough safety controls in place, people start operating like they're not actually on a high wire.
Yep.
It's like, oh, I've got a net, and I got a harness, and I got this, and I got that, and it's fine.
Everything's awesome. Yep. We don't have to worry about it.
So for those curious about this for the first time seeing it, HashiCorp does have a GitHub site. I put it in the Discord.
Yep.
So you can use the kind of the community edition there, I think is what it's called, but I forget. But it's a very good place to start to learn some of these concepts. Moving on here, Tom Bombadil, I believe I'm saying that right. Okay, it sounds like this is someone you know.
Lord of the Rings.
Oh, is that? Oh, of course.
Tom Bombadil.
Yes.
The guy who was left out of the movies. So
yeah. Okay. Yeah. Got it. I'm gonna have to cut like a totem chip and Boyton cut a corner
sing
off
a song.
my
You need to sing a
card.
song. You'd have to sing a song now. Sorry. Go ahead.
Can't you just? I had a visceral reaction to this. Can't you just dump LSAS using Task Manager?
Yes and no. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. By default, yes. Depending on the endpoint protection, no. That's why I was saying it depends what is being used by default. But yes, absolutely. You could use Task Manager, right click, say dump, and it will by default. Absolutely. And then you take that offline and you get to use that for all sorts of things. Absolutely.
Yeah, we used to do organization I was at. We were aiming to do it twice a year, but essentially do dumps of LSAS and other passwords and then run them against rainbow tables and whatnot, just to kind of get an idea of places that, hey, maybe we need to strengthen our policies. So yeah, it's good stuff. Greg Newmark, run as would create a folder under the user, right?
Correct. It creates it when you do run as it is you have logged into the box. You have just not logged in the normal method. So it creates the full user profile under users, etc. Everything is there just as if they have physically logged into the box. Absolutely correct.
Cool. Let's take a look here. Lori Heisel, what advantage do you have when you tell EDR not to drop LSAS? Is there an advantage?
So you tell the EDR not to allow LSAS to be dumped?
Yeah,
Uh,
I assume that's what they're saying. And to
yeah.
be, and I mean, yeah, I'm sure you
Yep.
can do that. You got
So
process hooks.
there are, like everything, there are times where you do have to dump LSAS. There are legitimate reasons where that might need to happen. The idea is that you don't want it to be occurring on a regular basis. So it's either, depending on your EDR solution, it might be you have the ability to say some people can and other people can't. It might be I just block all, and then if we run into this troubleshooting scenario, we can move it to a different profile where now we can dump LSAS on it and pull it. That is a better way of doing it than just saying let administrators dump LSAS.
Yeah. And one last question. It's also from Lori, and then we're going to wrap up here. So if we didn't get to your questions, there was a few in Q&A that I didn't pull out yet. So
Okay.
Jeremy, Mark, Nick, Otakar, I hope I'm saying that right, John Paul, James, Mark, and the rest of you here, George, do apologize. We try and limit this to about 15 minutes post-show, but Eric said he would jump into Discord. So if you put a question into Q&A, or you've got one in Discord we didn't get to, please jump into our webcast live stream channel in Antisyphon, and Eric will check those out and hopefully be able to answer your questions, etc. So last question here. What solutions do you recommend for separation of duties between servers, endpoints, DBA, and applications? And I'll temper this with the idea that we don't work for any of these companies that might be mentioned, but when we say solutions, let's not leave out processes, general technologies. But what do you like when you see people doing this right?
So yeah, I think it has a lot to do with your organization's mentality, right? You can absolutely buy a tool. You can buy your privilege access management tool, which would solve this if you implemented it properly, right? So I need to do something on that box. I get my creds temporarily one way or another, and I move on. But once again, the idea of I'm going to just start trying to give a little bit more separation between accounts and having different accounts with different privileges is a cost effective. You don't have to buy a tool. It is a process related thing. And yes, it does impact your operations team. I completely agree. Right, where you need to have multiple accounts. And I'm not saying that everybody needs to go gung-ho and have 26 accounts, which is what I've had, but maybe having like 5 would be better, right? Depending on your org. That, it seems like a large number. It really does, but 5 is not that big, in my opinion. Otherwise, as far as tools, as I said, CyberArk is by far the most well-known. It's a great utility. It's also, I think, probably the most expensive. I know people have used HashiCorp in their tools. It really comes down to, I don't think there's one that I would pick over the others. It's more of the one that you like, because everybody likes different things in their tools. And some of these tools are going to come with other tools as part of it, which might be more useful for you, right? So there's so many different things to say. What would I say to use? For me, I like to go back to the basic, which is why I like talking about credential compartmentalization. You could do that without spending money. You can put it in place right now. Yes, there is an operational cost, but there's no outlay of a new tool, which has an operational cost associated with it because you have to manage the tool.
Yeah, I'd like to add one piece to that as we wrap up, because you said 5 accounts, but I always like to boil it down even further. If you started just one place, right? I've been at multiple large organizations that have taken this approach, and I still believe it's an excellent approach. Your IT staff or individuals that have privileged accounts, whether it be domain admin, enterprise admin, power user for specific servers, or some sort of high-level privilege for trusted sensitive systems. Immediately from jump, they say, cool, you're going to be on IT. Here's your regular, everyday, daily driver account that you get your email and everything else on. And here's your second account, which might end with like -ADM or your credentials 2, or in really good environments, they do something that can't even be linked to the user. It's just like a string of numbers, and that is your admin password. And when you ask for, hey, I need privileges to access these systems as part of my new responsibilities, they don't add that to your daily driver account that you'd be opening email on, etc. And that really limits it to 2 accounts, and that not even for everybody. That just limits it to 2 accounts for people who have privileged access. And if you just start there, it's going to do a world of good. And even cost-wise, because we were discussing that as well in Discord. Folks were saying, well, Microsoft doesn't charge you for the extra accounts. And I said, well, I'm pretty sure they still charge you for interactive accounts, which is what you would need here, service and that. So thoughts on that real quick as we end?
So I'm gonna one up you. I'm
That's
gonna say 3 for
3? Okay.
only I like 2.
It's a
except for
negotiation
domain-
now.
Yeah, except for domain admins. Okay.
Oh,
Your domain admin should be unique.
Yeah.
Even if all of your IT people are domain admins, so be it. That should be its own separate account, unique
great
from the
point.
others. So
Yeah.
I go to at least 3,
Yeah.
but only for people who have domain admin privileges. Otherwise, 2 is so much better than 1. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But yes.
Yeah, no, great call out. Yeah, absolutely. So cool. So that wraps it up for us. If your question didn't get answered, please jump into Discord. Thanks for sticking around. It's just Ryan and everyone else had left. So thank you, Allison, Kyle, Laura. Who else was on? Our time traveling nerd herder, our Caleb. Sure, I'm forgetting someone at this point, but and Noah as well. So thank you all for joining earlier. Check out the pre-show banter. Join us about 30 minutes ahead of time. Also, we do sometimes we do this, a little post show where if we have extra questions or we have technical issues, we go a little longer there. And as was mentioned, Eric's teaching. So if any of this interests you, you say, wow, I want to learn more from this guy, go to antisyphontraining.com and check out his upcoming class on red teaming Active Directory. Don't forget about Wild West Hack and Fest. We'd love to see you out there. And Eric, like you said, you're going to stick around in Discord for a little bit, correct?
I will. And thank you for having me as always.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you for sticking around for another Anticast. Check us out tomorrow on Thursday. Excuse me. Check us out on Thursday for another BHIS webcast tomorrow about log forensics. And some of you already know what's coming. Johnny C's got it there. Ryan, kill it with fire.